Oh la la la, oh la 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 la. Baqabela qam, baqabela ngenqoqo, bexakwe inqubaqam. Oh baqabela qam, baqabela ngenqoqo, bexakwe inqubaqam. Ayikele isqera tatungeke.
Very good evening to you and welcome to everybody who's not here at Walter Sisulu Square in Kliptown. We're here for our major EFF election debate. The election is just but a couple of weeks away. We gathered to look at some of the issues with 4 of the major parties. Before I introduce our main speakers, can I just ask everybody who's here in this hall to introduce yourselves to the EFF listeners? Make a big noise, people. A few minutes ago, I said to everybody, please can you try not to make too much noise. But what I'm telling you, guys, we've got a nice, big, strong audience here representing the 4 political parties who will be here. They'll be taking part, asking their questions, expressing their views. We have Agang seated, all wearing their green T-shirts. Over on the other side, the DA is in blue, the ANC in gold, black and green, and the economic freedom fighters, well, you can see them. It's a sea of red berets. So they're all here tonight. Let me introduce our guests who are with us tonight. First of all, we say good evening to Qedani Mahlangu, who's elections manager for Gauteng of the African National Congress and is also MEC for Economic Development. MEC, welcome and thanks for giving us your time. Joining us from the Democratic Alliance is Musi Maimane. He is the Gauteng Premier candidate for the GA. Mr. Maimane, welcome to you. Dali Mpofu, Gauteng Premier. I thought Gauteng wasn't the province of booing. We had a big debate about this. Rori Tshabalala is the new one thing that you think is wrong with Gauteng province that you're fixing. What is that one thing? I know there are many issues, I know it's complicated. If you could pick one thing that you want to put right, what would that be?
The one thing that needs to be fixed in Gauteng, but also across the whole country, is putting the citizens at the levers of power in this country.
And how
if citizens had one of the policy positions that we're putting forward is that the citizens should be voting for the members of parliament that will represent their specific areas in parliament, to make sure that if there is an issue that is not being addressed in my area where I stay, I know who to blame, I know who needs to be accountable. At this stage, somehow, somewhere in the middle of Johannesburg, decides who's going to represent me. That person might not even live in my township, that person might never even know where my township is. The key thing is to make sure that the citizens know who represents them and have the power to place that person and to remove them when they're not informed.
When you think about what's going on in the province and you're in a position to make a difference because you're part of the party that's in power, what's the one thing that keeps you awake at night? What worries you the most?
It's the public transport. What we plan to do with public transport is to make sure that each and every citizen across the length and breadth of Gauteng is able to get to work on time, efficient public transport, whether using bus or train or rail, those people should be able to get around with ease because Gauteng is manageable in size.
Why haven't you done that already?
We have done a lot. The Gauteng does not come from the sky. It was introduced by the ANC government as we speak. We've got the new railway trains that have been bought by PRASA. They're going to be on stream. next day healthcare. So we've done, BRT was introduced by the ANC government in Johannesburg. It is working, it started in the township, here in Soweto, it's going to the suburbs, it's going to be introduced in Ekurhuleni, it's going to be introduced in China, not anywhere else in this current financial level municipality.
One thing. You're now the Premier. What is your first priority?
Well, the first priority, John, is to alleviate poverty. Poverty is endemic and it is a function of inequality, of unemployment, but most importantly, something that gets neglected, which is underemployment. In that some of the people who are actually working are earning peanuts, and therefore that is why we talk about minimum wages, for example. So poverty covers all those aspects. And but what we're hearing from when we are doing door-to-door campaigns are issues of sanitation, housing, but unemployment is obviously at the top of the ladder.
Musi Maimane?
Thank you, John.
Without fail, the issue of job creation is the most vital issue of this economic hub. Gauteng is the largest economic partner in the country, the third largest economy in Africa. And it is a crime that, in fact, young people, young South Africans cannot find work in this province, and without fail, that in fact, that 35, just over 30% in the definition of unemployment, people can't find work.
So you're going to expand the public service?
So the most critical thing is that we've got to ensure that South Africans were able to start businesses, whether those are small, and therefore small businesses to go to medium enterprise, must be able to do it with ease here in Gauteng. And that's by making sure that you alleviate issues of high compliance and the cost of compliance. And equally so, this double taxation that we call e-tolling, that makes it very, very hard for people to be able to run their businesses. So the issue here is, let small businesses begin so that more people can find work.
Now, I'm going to say this, and I can't even push. Can I make a suggestion? Let's hear the ideas of every party, applaud your own party's ideas, and feel free to boo, but I'd like to discourage it, because up here on the platform, one party will win this election, but actually there's a lot of people who've thought long and hard about what they want to offer the electorate. This may be, we will only find out later, a close election, or not a very close election, but I'll tell you one thing about election 2014. There has never been a flourishing of ideas and creative thinking. And those ideas belong across all our parties. So feel free to boo, but I just feel I'm doing my duty by asking you not to. Roar for your own team, but if we could not have booing, I would be grateful. But it's up to you in the end. Let's...
Yeah. No, I was going to just agree with you and then appeal that we don't boo other speakers. I think the people of Gauteng have already booed the people who need to be booed.
Let's get into the issues. Dali Mpofu, let's start with you. You're saying that jobs is a major thing on the issue. I'm looking at your policy, and all I'm seeing is wage increases for everybody. And all I'm seeing is grants being doubled, and I'm not seeing anywhere how you're going to pay for all of that. So let's ask you a few questions about your increases in wages. Builders, 7,000 Rand. Is that everybody on a building site gets 7,000 Rand?
Yes.
Sorry,
John,
just a couple more questions.
Firstly, it means you haven't read the manifesto.
Okay.
This is the only manifesto,
Yes.
the only one in the country that actually has a section on how things are going to be funded.
Okay.
So if you didn't see it, then...
No, I've seen it, but I want you to explain it.
Yes. Well, let me explain to you. The minimum, you see, the only way you're going to create jobs is by growing the economy, right? I'm sure so far everybody agrees with that. How do you grow an economy? You grow an economy by manufacturing more goods and services. Now, there's no point in manufacturing goods and services if nobody's going to buy them, you see.
Yes.
So the only way you're going to create demand in an economy is to have people with money in their pocket. Because there's no point in even having entrepreneurs and all these nice things if the consumer demand is not going to be there. That is why in Germany and the US, there's a hot debate right now about minimum wages. Because it's one of the most classical ways to stimulate an economy. As to where the figures that we have for the minimum wages are not palm sacks.
Yes.
These are figures that come from the sectoral unions which have been negotiated or rather researched. COSATU, for example, has said that a minimum wage is 4,500 rand. That you'll find reflected here. AMCU has said that the minimum wage in the mining sector is 12,500. So these are not figures that just come from the sky.
I understand that, but as you've engaged with each sector, have you looked at whether that sector has created jobs or lost them? Because surely that's the critical point. It's all very well to say the desired wage is this, but if that desired wage is paid to a diminishing number of people, then you defeat surely your first point that the economy needs to grow with a number of people.
No. It doesn't work like that. What you do is you stimulate the economy as a whole. And the only way to stimulate the economy as a whole, as I say, is to have economic activity. And that economic activity will only come when people consume goods and services. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is to increase public sector investment. But the bottom line, John, about the South African economy is that the difference between us and these other parties on my right is that they all believe in something called the NDP, which is a neoliberal outlook which suggests that our problems will be resolved by the market. We believe very strongly that the problems of South Africa were created by massive state intervention, and they cannot be resolved by the invisible hand of the market. You need to intervene, and price determination, because minimum wage is nothing else but the determination of the price of labor. Price determination is one of the ways in which you regulate and you intervene in the economy.
Part of the DA's policy, Mr. Maimane, is to get money out of the SETAs and get it back to other structures like further education and training colleges. That can't be done quickly. Well, what are you going to do in the interim? I mean, those FETs need to be reskilled, recapacitated. We could have a lull of 2-3 years before that money is productively used.
I think without fail, let's understand what the jobs of SETAs were. They were designed in many ways as the middleman and the transfer of skills towards young unemployed South Africans.
Yes.
The job that we've got to do now is to think about what is the development of young people needs to look like. So in our manifesto, we highlight the fact that we shifted money and we increase the bursary fund by 16 billion rands to increase opportunities for young people to be able to study further. But we equally so have advocated for the youth wage subsidy, because we believe quite fundamentally that in an economy such as ours, if you diminish barriers to entry for young people to get into the workspace, you can create an opportunity for them to get the right skills. But the third and vital issue is we talk about 1 million internships. So we're saying when it comes to youth development, you can give young people internships. So that rather than diverting money into a middleman, you are diverting money into a space that can create tangible skills transfer. It is not burdened by bureaucracy and the transfer of funds, but instead you make it linear, that young people can be developed on-site, learn the right skills, so that they become economic agents.
Now, I want to ask you, Mr. Tshabalala, part of your
50% or even more of the people of Gauteng came here seeking economic opportunities. And that is why you have millions and millions of people who come in every year, no longer just from other provinces, but also from the rest of the continent. So naturally, the issue of congestion becomes a factor, because this is the smallest province in geographical size and with the largest population. So it's a no-brainer. You can't then be building houses, these little matchbox houses, spreading across the land, as it were.
So you need small houses one on top of another?
No. That's your manifesto. My manifesto says you must have quality housing. In other words, you mustn't have the housing that we have now, which in the townships is called Vezinyao. Vezinyao literally means while you are sleeping, you are sleeping. And that is an insult to the dignity of our people. You know, John, I grew up in a one-roomed house or a glorified shack. So the last thing that I want is to be given a house that is even worse than that apartheid gave to our people.
Since 1994, we've built more than 900,000 houses in Gauteng. Those houses, who are we providing them to? To people who are earning between 0 and 3,500, who will never have an opportunity to get a house independently on their own without the state intervention. That's what the RTP houses have been meant for. Secondly, we've also been improving over a period of time to a point where now we talk about human settlements. Some of the houses that we've been building over time have been improving on a daily basis. If you look at Lehigh today, you look at Luferein, you look at Cosmo City, those are the issue of the size depends on the levels of income, but also what government does. We offer, not only do we offer you a house, an RTP house, we offer you a house with a title deed.
When we talk about the issue of housing, we must say, what are we doing about science and service to make sure that even while South Africans are living in certain spaces that are maybe less than optimal, how do we make sure we give basic services? How do we deliver water, electricity, and sanitation? So I want to talk about gap housing, because in fact, Mr. Mpofu mentioned the people who are underemployed. Here in South Africa, people who earn just above the threshold of title deeds, but below their access to bonded housing, cannot get a house. We've got to talk about gap subsidization to make sure those people can also be owners of a house. So when we talk about housing, it's a multiple strategy, and I'm saying we've got to start at least by doing the basics, make sure people have title.
Okay. The issue here is that people, the reason why we say we have a lot of inward migration into Gauteng is that people are leaving their provinces and coming to Gauteng looking for opportunities and looking for jobs. What that does is it fractures the family unit. So we need to make sure that we create jobs in the other provinces as well. Let us make sure that in doing so, we alleviate the challenge, because for how long are people going to be relying on government to provide them with housing? So the housing issue is just symptomatic of an underlying issue of the economy not creating enough jobs where people stay in order to make sure that they can build their own houses, because then you want to hold them to ransom with this housing. People have been told, for example, that they will lose their houses if they do not vote for certain parties this election. We want to make sure that they are independent. We want to make sure that their title deeds are not held to ransom.
I've got a question for the three political parties in front of me. My first question will be, what is the position of the ANC and EFF concerning international relations and immigration bill? And what about the labor brokers, especially to the
okay. If you were to say, let's disband all labor brokers, you would then, in fact, underpath the employment levels here in South Africa.
Why would that happen? Because surely a supermarket will always need that number of cashiers if there's that number of customers. Why would taking a labor broker out of the equation reduce employment? I don't understand.
Because often, John, what happens in any company, the challenge often is about management of HR, management of various things. And we've made our labor laws complex on the issue of compliance, that people often find themselves paying up to 80,000 rand just to comply without trading a single day.
The problem with labor brokers, we have said that
we want to make sure that exploitative practices are done away with in labor. So not just labor broking that undermines and turns people into slaves, but also practices that mean that people are getting wages that are below a living standard.
So the reason why we're not seeing xenophobic attacks perhaps against the Americans and the Australians is that because they don't typically come and start to compete for the very same resources that our people are reliant on. No, hear me.
He's got a point.
We've got citizens here from Deep Sloot. You can ask them how many Australians and Americans live in Deep Sloot along with them. But they can point to Zimbabweans and others of other nationalities that live in Deep Sloot along with them. Because we cannot say do away completely with our African brothers and sisters coming here and assisting. Let us make sure that they help us to build this economy and create more jobs. That's the first thing.
I think Mr. Maimane is going to say, you've been reading his manifesto.
No. What he's saying is we must think like Africans.
Okay, I want to get
in Africa. We must think like Africans.
To live in an international world which the environment is better for all people who live in the world, particularly developing countries and people in the rest of the continent. There is a gentleman I listened to a few weeks ago. His name is John Perlman. He's one of the Jewish a colleague. He was speaking at a function that I attended recently. He says, to his surprise, that today people are making an issue of the labor laws, forgetting that under apartheid there was 119% turnover of ordinary workers. At easy will, an employer will fire an employee simply because they do not want them to pay them. So what we have done with the existing labor laws, we have ensured that there is an employer cannot fire an employee without following due process.
I've got a question for the ANC and a question for the DA, just briefly. To the ANC, you've been going around the country telling everybody a lot of stories. The question is, the horrible stories, the nightmarish stories, you are not standing up for. My question is, on corruption, the President, Nkandla, arms deal, do you honestly believe deep in yourselves that corruption is a major problem in this country and that it impacts severely on our efforts to fight poverty?
Okay, and you'll say
that's for the DA. I mean for the ANC. For the DA, Musi, can I ask that you please explain to us how will the DA create jobs?
When we come to job creation, particularly within a provincial setup, you must establish what are the things that you must do. There's no question about the fact that we must grow the economy of Gauteng. But the most vital thing is that to do that, not what government's role is in the economy, is to create that enabling environment. That's about removing all the obstacles to trade. One of the things that are key is this issue of tolling. What tolling does is that it lets people have a choice between whether they want to pay tolling or hire someone. It increases the cost of doing business. It's policies like that that eliminate the investor confidence coming into Gauteng. But equally so, what we've got to do is be able to stimulate and allow more entrepreneurial in small businesses to grow. Because where real jobs emerge from rather than job opportunities, when we talk about real jobs, we talk about a space where those who start small businesses who hire between 1 to 5 people must be encouraged. We must have more of that. To do that, we must be able to give them spaces where they can trade from. We've made it quite clear, and I'm bold to say it again, that those who have innovative business ideas can be able to find government property at R1 a year to trade and to be able to run them. Already, the Gauteng government wastes 6 billion rands. That's 24 Nkandlas, to put it in context.
The issues on corruption. The ANC is on record on saying we must deal with corruption, and we are dealing with corruption. Some of the things, can you please listen to me? Some of the things, for instance, practically under the SG of the ANC, together with the Treasurer General and the DSG comrades, what they have said, we must deal with whatever wrongs that have been identified Mugaja report. As we speak now, the parliamentary committee is sitting considering those issues. Wherever individuals that have been found to have inflated prices, to have done wrong, those people are going to be put to book. And that is our stance.
I want to highlight the fact that obviously when you talk about a good story, I think the Western Cape story is a good story. It's a story that, in fact, I want to highlight by the presidency's own report, because we need to be able to read in these things. Western Cape has the highest access to water at 99.1%, flush toilets at 90.5%, electricity at 94%. Presidency report, which says that, in fact, in communities, we are working hard to make sure that access to delivery is improving continuously. I think when you come here in Gauteng, you'll discover those stats are a lot lower than that. That's why we want to come here and improve it to the late 90s as we go. On the second issue, which is the issue of gender, etc., I want to highlight, when you talk about candidate selection, you know, and we pride ourselves in saying, we've gone out of our way to advertise positions to say, let people come through. We are working on the journey. We accept the fact that... Now, John, you would know as much as I do that if I go into communities, activism, etc., and the supply, often you find our sisters aren't always wanting to stand. ANC's policy of gender, of 50-50, is not our policy, because what often happens is that you invariably say, let's just comply with gender rather than in fact always. We are arguing more critically, John, and this is the point that we got to make, is that in the ANC's 100-year history, they've never once been led by a woman. So if you talk about gender and gender...
Yeah, look, I think that Musi Maimane is misleading this audience. Firstly, you can't use the legacy of apartheid that accumulated in the Western Cape to come and tell us that they are delivering there when people are using open toilets, which is why they are throwing them. That's why there are poor protests there. It is exactly because of that. Secondly, when we talk about equality, if we are saying one of the biggest problems is equality, then we must also talk about gender equality. That is why we have a 50-50 policy also on our list. So you can't just choose one leader. He's just advertising the medal now.
Can we just have a moment of silence so we can wrap up and that extends to the panel?
Is Ryan's party on WhatsApp?
Can I ask the panel to give the audience a round of applause?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can I ask the audience to give the panel a round of applause?
I can let